All right, today we're diving into a fascinating financial strategy from our source material that they call the 1099 recoupment process. Now, this is a very specific and frankly pretty unconventional theory about how money, your identity, and even the IRS are all connected. So let's break down how it's all said to work.
Okay, so here's how we're going to walk through this. First, we have to understand the core idea behind it all, this concept of a monetized identity. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts, looking at these specific IRS forms involved, the 1099A and B. After that, we'll see how this ties into the banking system, and we'll finish up by looking at how the final recoupment claim is supposedly made.
All right, let's kick things off with the foundational concept. This is the big idea that, according to the source, makes this entire process tick. So, the whole thing really starts with this one kind of mind-bending question. What if your personal identity is actually a monetized asset in the world of commerce? And here's the central claim from the source. The idea is that every time a loan or a bill is created in your name, it's not just a debt, it's an asset that gets bundled up, securitized, and traded on the open market, making corporations, well, a whole lot of money. Now, to really get this, you have to understand a key term they use, the blue card person. This isn't you, the living, breathing person. Nope. This is the legal entity, the commercial fiction that's represented by your name in all capital letters on documents, and it's tied directly to your social security number. Okay, so that's the theory. Now let's get into the nitty-gritty, the actual mechanics of how this theory is supposedly put into action, starting with the very first IRS form. Now, the source makes a really big deal about this. The 1099A in this context is not a bill, it's not a payment. Its only job is to be a reporting tool, basically a way to officially put the IRS on notice that a certain kind of transaction has taken place. So what's the point of filing it? Well, according to the theory, you're creating an official paper trail. You're formally declaring that your blue card person gave something of value to a corporation, but that the corporation didn't provide equal value in return. And that's what officially kicks off this whole recoupment process. All right, once that initial report is filed, the process moves on. Now we're talking about two more key forms, and these are absolutely central to making the strategy work. And this next move, this is where the core mechanic really comes into focus. It's like a 1-2 punch. First, a 1099B is filed to report a barter exchange, again, confirming value was given. But then a second 1099B is filed. And this is the crucial part. It completely flips the script. Suddenly, the corporation is listed as the payer, and your blue card person is listed as the recipient. Okay, but here is where it gets really interesting. According to the source, the value of this barter isn't the original amount. No, you take the original value from that very first form, the 1099A, and you multiply it by 10. So you're probably asking yourself, wait, why 10? Where does that number even come from? Well, this source material connects this multiplication directly to the mechanics of our banking system, specifically something called fractional reserve banking. The idea here is that this entire process is basically tapping into the power of fractional reserve banking. The system that allows banks to lend out way more money than they actually have in deposits. This ability to create money is what's presented as the engine that makes this whole recoupment strategy possible. So let's walk through how the source sees this happening. It all starts with you making a deposit. The theory claims the bank then takes your deposit and uses it like collateral to get a much larger advance of funds from the Federal Reserve, potentially up to 10 times the value. And this new money, it argues, is created and tied directly to your identity. And this is the absolute linchpin of the whole argument, right? The source stresses that none of this happens without you. It's your action, your deposit, that acts as the spark that allows the money supply to expand. Without that first step, none of this supposed value generation would ever happen. Okay, so we've got the theory, we've got the forms, we understand the connection to the banking system. Let's get to the final stage and see how all of these pieces are meant to come together to make the actual claim.
Now hold on, you don't actually claim that full 10 times amount. The process described in the source is super specific about this. Instead, you make a claim for a very precise figure, 24% of that multiplied barter value.
So let's put all the pieces together for the grand finale. The process ends with you claiming that 24% of the multiplied value. According to the source, this claimed amount will then show up on your IRS transcript. From there, the final step is to file a standard 1040 form, and the expected outcome is described as receiving an overpayment refund from the IRS. When you step back and look at this entire theory from our source material, it really makes you think, doesn't it? It presents this pretty radical view on where value truly originates in our economy, suggesting it's not from institutions, but from the individual's identity itself. Now, while this is for sure a highly unorthodox take on our tax and banking systems, it definitely challenges you to think differently about the nature of money and credit.